Hello and welcome to Anime Memories, and on this episode I'm going to be talking about Appleseed. This is another anime that I bought back in my early days, however, it wasn't exactly an impulse buy. I was a big fan of Spill.com at the time, which was a movie reviewing site, and one of the reviewers on there named C. Robert Cargill spoke highly of the sequel to this, Appleseed Ex Machina. So with his recommendation, I decided to pick up the original and the sequel at the same time. It's been a long time since I've seen either of them, so I decided to go back and rewatch them to see what I would think of them today. I'll be starting with the original and I'll be covering Ex Machina somewhere in the future. It starts with the scene of a female soldier named Doonan, who's currently fighting in the middle of a global war. She's taken in by a group called eSWAT, and they inform her that the war's actually been over for months, so all her recent battles were for nothing. After the war had no clear winner, everyone decided to come together in the city of Olympus. It's a utopian society where half the population is human and the other half are bioroids, which are genetically modified humans who have their emotions suppressed. On top of that,
bioroids are vastly different life forms from human beings.
Their reproductive functions remain inactive, so they can produce no offspring.
In other words, no sex.
Wait, we reproduce by having sex? Wow, I always thought we reproduced by headbutting each other, but oh boy, I guess I was completely wrong. Thank you for pointing this out to me. Anyway, the main goal of the bioroids is to stabilise human society, which has been going amazingly so far, and I'm sure that absolutely no problems will arise in the future. Yeah, everything goes to shit. So I think I'm going to switch the format of this review around a bit so I can cover the most noticeable aspect first, the 3D art style. I would compare the visuals here to really high-level PlayStation 2 cutscenes, and back when I first saw this around 8 years ago, it looked pretty good. Not today though. I guess that's the main problem with 3D animation. For the time, it looks fantastic, but a few years down the track, it's gonna look old and unimpressive. The CGI was a big selling point of this movie, and since it doesn't cut it now, you're gonna have to get most of your enjoyment from the story. So, how is the story? It's fine, but did it impact me in any significant way? Not really. The story started off kind of muddled. It kept jumping all over the place, throwing in all these different characters and different side plots. It was really hard for me to keep up. There were also a few really long exposition dumps where they were trying to take all this information and shove it in my face. And most of the time I just ended up tuning out. I was able to understand the basics of what was going on, but I feel like many of the smaller plot details just went in one ear and out the other. I will admit though, this could just be me. I've previously mentioned that I have a very short attention span, so maybe other people could keep up with the plot better than I did. But here's the thing, most of my criticism is targeted to the first 2 acts of the story only. Towards the end, when all the side plots converge and it starts to build to this epic climax, it became much more enjoyable, and at times, I even found myself getting quite excited. It's a real pity that the first hour was such a slog because the ending was great. However, even with that small amount of positivity, I've yet to talk about my biggest problem with the story. Many of the themes in here aren't all that interesting. They cover topics such as whether or not human cloning is a good idea, is man too bloodthirsty, and would we be better off being ruled over by an emotionless robotic entity. None of these are bad, however, they've all been done so many times before, and they've also been done a lot better as well. Because of this, the story was very bland to me. There was only one major plot point that I identified with, and that was Doonan trying to come to terms with the current condition of her former boyfriend Briarios. They became very close by fighting together during the war, but one day, he just vanished, leaving Doonan to think that he had perished. He was still very much alive, however, due to severe injuries, his body is now mostly robotic. She clearly still loves him, but does he love her? Does he have the same personality as before? Are there any remnants of his humanity left? These are some very interesting questions, and it was enthralling to see the two leads try and adjust to all the different changes that have occurred. So, because of my interest in this side plot, I ended up liking both Doonan and Briarios. However, being that Doonan is the protagonist and gets most of the focus, she was by far the most interesting character in the anime. She goes through so much, and it really began to hit me when her backstory was revealed. With all the crappy experiences that she has in her childhood and even in her adult life as well, it's amazing that she came out to be reasonably well adjusted. The main reason why I found the ending to be so exhilarating wasn't because of the plot, it was because of Doonan. I really wanted to see her come back safe during all those climactic battles that occurred towards the end. It's unfortunate though that I couldn't connect as much with any of the supporting cast. Like with the story, the supporting characters were fine, but they just didn't make much of an impact on me, so I don't really have much to say about them. Going back to the technical aspects for a bit, I remember reviews of this saying that the animation was underwhelming, and after watching this again, I can see why they said that. Now, the action scenes were pretty good. The characters were doing all these flips, slides, and other complex maneuvers rather smoothly. Outside of the battles though, everyone moves like a mannequin, as if someone's off screen just pulling their strings. It's not horrible, mind you, but it is extremely stiff, and like with the 3D art, it hasn't aged well. Now, since this is an action anime, the soundtrack tries to be very energetic, but it ends up falling flat. It contains a bunch of generic rock tracks that I forgot about the second they were over. The one noteworthy aspect of the soundtrack is that it contains a bunch of Western music like the Basement Jaxx song, Good Luck. The issue is that I felt like they added absolutely nothing to the show, so their inclusion was pointless. Appleseed certainly has its positives. It's got a likable protagonist, and the ending is solid. However, it just doesn't do enough to make it worth watching. It stood out back in the day because the visuals looked amazing, however, they just don't hold up anymore. And because of that, there isn't much of a reason to watch Appleseed now. Oh, this turned out to be much more depressing than I thought it would be. I really hope that the sequel holds up much better. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you have any feedback, feel free to leave a comment, and if you like this video and want to see more, feel free to subscribe as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.